This is Saskia, and this is Note to Self, your weekly dose of everything that's simply too long to text. Consider this your personal invitation into my inner circle, where I share my thoughts, feelings, and quiet reflections that usually live inside my Notes app. Thanks for joining me. Welcome to Note to Self. I'm Saskia, and you already know that. I promised myself that I wasn't going to talk about the weather today. So I'm not going to talk about the weather. But one nature-related topic, this is like something I love about living in a place with four seasons, because where I grew up, we had literally summer all year round pretty much. I didn't own a jacket before I moved overseas. I mean, I guess when I moved down south in Australia, I bought a jacket. I remember I bought my first trench coat and I was very excited. But when I moved here, I'd never had a winter coat. I'd never had like proper winter boots. And coming here and experiencing seasons here as in New York, it still is always so fun. And we're in the season right now. Here we go. It was weather related. And it's spring. And there's two trees outside my window, and you're just starting to see the little buds of new growth coming out every day. And I swear to God, overnight, yesterday I just started to notice them coming out, and this morning I woke up and it looks like it grew overnight, which it clearly did. But I'm always fascinated by how fast things can change. But yeah, it seriously never gets old. And I'll never forget my first winter here in the city. Oh God, I was so unprepared. Like I said, I didn't have any proper winter shoes. I would just wear my sneakers, which at the time, the ones that were really popular were those Adidas. Whatever, were they Adidas? I think they were. Or in Australia, we like to say Adidas for my Australian listeners. And they were like the white ones that had the three black straps, and or three black stripes, but they had like the wider toe at the end, not the ones that are cool right now or were a few seasons ago. The new shoes are the Pumas, guys. I know nothing about streetwear yet. I like to pretend I do. And I remember I was wearing those around the city, and we'd had the craziest storm, like the one we had this winter. And it was like the most hectic storm in the last 10 years or something. This was 2015. And it was just, the city was filled with snow for like a month, and all these what I called secret puddles appeared, where you think it's just a little bit of snow, and then you step into it and the puddle is a foot deep. And I would be constantly walking around with just the wettest feet. It was so gross. I consistently was sick that winter because I just didn't have the proper shoes. I had one proper coat, didn't understand about layering, didn't know about thermals. I was like all the little girlies going out in my tiny little fits with my big winter coat on, thinking that was smart. Oh, how things have changed. How time goes on, how we get older and we learn more and we are smarter, hopefully. Weird intro to the podcast. And I think I might as well just call this like a pop culture weather therapy podcast, because those seem to be the things I always talk about. But sue me, guys. I love those three things. I can't help myself. Anyways, it's been an interesting few weeks, that's for sure. I feel like I'm at the stage in my life where just everything is changing. Friends are getting engaged. Friends are moving to different cities. People are getting pregnant, having babies. Parents are aging. It is an exciting time. Not the parents aging part. The rest of it is a very exciting time. You know, I'm so happy for all my friends in these big moments that are happening. But I've also felt this just deep sadness that a chapter of our lives is over. And it has really scared me, thinking, will we ever get it back? And it sounds silly, but there's just like so many moments that I've been wondering, like, are we ever going to stay up until the sunrise and having danced all night, chatted about our lives and gone on these crazy adventures? It's like, am I just missing the party? And I don't think that's it. I think it's more than that. But I just feel like these times are over, and it's like mourning this as we all enter these new chapters. And I guess what I'm trying to ask myself is, are they over, or are they just on pause? as we make new memories. And times like this become more special because you have less of them, which I think, kind of echoes into one of my ins for this year, which was the continuation of my party girl era. And I love these moments with people and, being out and about. And I find myself gravitating to wanting to be out dancing and having all these great memories. But then in the same vein, I also really want to be at home. And I find myself daydreaming about living somewhere with more access to nature, with warmer weather, and just like a quieter way of living. And then I'm also planning on going back to Burning Man again this year. So I feel like a constant walking contradiction. And there's a part of me that's mourning this one stage of my life, but then also wanting something new, and then excited for my friends and all their changes, but sad to feel like we're losing something as well. And I just feel like in a way, maybe I'm mourning one chapter of my life and welcoming another. But me personally, I feel like I'm in the transition stage. Some other friends are maybe on the other side of it, but I feel like I'm just not quite there yet, but I'm starting to want different things. And I also just keep reminding myself the party's always going to be there and it'll always be waiting for me to return. And, when you feel like you need it, it's always there. And maybe it's okay to follow the change and allow the tide to wash away into something new. Very poetic. But these are these thoughts that are currently running through my mind. And it really became very real when I think it was last weekend or the weekend before, I was on the way to my best friend's engagement party and also her going away. Her and her partner got engaged and now they've left New York and they've moved somewhere else. And on the way there, I get a message from another really close friend who had recently told me that she was pregnant and her partner got engaged last year. They're getting married this year. They're having their first baby. And then they told me that they bought a house. So then they're moving. I was like, oh my God, there's so much happening. I'm so excited. But I'm also like, what? And then I had another call from another friend tell me that they're pregnant. There has been so many big life changes with many of the closest people in my life. I cannot tell you. It's kind of wild. And it just kind of just hit me in that moment. And I'm on the way to my friend's engagement and her going away. And I'm so excited, but I'm feeling this deep, deep sadness that I started tearing up and crying. And it wasn't bad. It was just that it was hitting me that all these things had quietly shifted and I hadn't even realized it. And I remember it's like I didn't want to share it with anyone, and I just felt this sadness. That's all I can say. So I started to kind of wonder as I've been feeling this, what is this feeling? And surely other people are feeling this because I think a lot of people are going through this. And I started to think about it, and I think what it is it's the grief in transitions. And ultimately what I've been feeling is grief. And I've been feeling so sad, and I think it's that many chapters across every element of my life, from chapters with my friends to chapters with my family, are starting to change, or they're starting to close and new ones are opening. So I wanted to dive into this grief and transitions a little further, and I started to really, as you know, map this all out. So we're going to discuss 6 different elements to this topic. The first one I want to dive into around the grief and transitions is the quiet grief of life transitions. So let's start with number 1. What is this? So I think life chapters ending can often feel like grief, even when the new chapter is positive. I'm so excited for my friends that are getting engaged, having babies, moving cities, but I'm equally really sad. And I find myself crying a lot these days, feeling like I can't quite ground myself to the world around me. It just feels like everything is shifting, that it's really hard to find a level footing. There's just so much change that I can't quite figure out where I stand. And I'm really excited for the future, but I'm also really sad for what I'm saying goodbye to. And this grief does feel really quiet. It feels lonely because a part of me feels really guilty for feeling this way. When a friend calls you and tells you, they're engaged or they bought a house or they're, moving or they're having a baby or they got a new job, whatever it is, I think normally I'd be like, yes, but when it's happening on all fronts, it is really hard to process. And there's this like such excitement and joy, like pure joy and excitement for my friend, but a sadness for what I feel like, this chapter is closing. And I think it felt different when I had, one friend 5 years ago having a baby for the first time, because it wasn't everyone. And I think when everyone's going through this change and you've built this life together in this city that we're all living in, we're all here in New York together, these people that I'm talking about, it really starts to hit you in a different way. And I guess I started to wonder, why is it that I can express the grief at the same time as the happiness? That I can be happy for my friend while also sad for the changes. And I think the sadness is actually giving recognition to the chapter that's closing. It's recognizing how important and special this time was. It's acknowledging that time. And I feel like by burying it, it's doing a disservice to myself, but also to the recognition of how special this time together was. So I was thinking about this more because when I mentioned the engagement party that I was on the way to, something that I really valued at this party. So I'm feeling really sad, and I get to this engagement party and going away party. And I was, trying to be chipper and, of course I wasn't going to like bring down the mood. But what was so lovely is my friend, who was her engagement party and going away, she shares, we're like, how are you feeling? She was like, I'm so happy and excited, but like, I'm really sad. She's like, I haven't stopped crying. I feel like I'm just doing deep grieving. There's just so much change. And I was like, girl, oh my God, I'm so glad you said that, because I'm feeling the same way. And then another friend who's going through big life changes said she was feeling that. And all of us were kind of feeling it. And it gave her opening up, made room for everyone else to say, I'm so excited and happy, but I also have grief. And it ended up being so cathartic. And it was just like a really beautiful moment to share that. And I feel like sharing this and making it not quiet grief, but something that you can talk about with your friends and loved ones is necessary, because it started to heal the wound that was sitting in me, and also made me feel like I'm not alone in this, and that it's okay to be excited and also equally grieving as well. And I guess there was a part of me that started to look at the grief and wonder, am I really mourning the loss of the experiences, or maybe a version of myself that was in charge the last few years? And I think that probably is it, is that of course you're mourning these moments with friends, but you're still going to have them in your life. I think as we all start to enter different stages, we move into these new archetypes and these new versions of ourselves. And the other version isn't necessarily gone, but it's almost like mourning sometimes the freedom that was there. And that's something that I've kind of been mulling around in my head. And, I don't have the answer to it, but I'm trying to figure out like, where is the sadness coming from? Because I think there's lots of elements to it. Which, kind of brings me to my next point, which is really around the evolution of friendship generally. So with these changes, your friendships are going through a shift. And I think that's also an element to the mourning. One chapter is closing and another version of your friendship is beginning. And this year I've thought more and more about intentional time. And again, like I said in one of my ins, it was about treating your time like diamonds. It is so precious and not something to be thrown away. And as friends move away or priorities shift in their life, the time together becomes less of a given, and it's something you need to work towards with intentional connection. And I think there's a really interesting shift that happens, and I felt it from my 20s to my 30s, is in my 20s, my life was much more unstructured. We had so much time for ourselves and for our friends. And it was always a given that I would see my friends. We would organize things, of course, but I just remember we were a lot more flexible, but also it's not sporadic. It's like we would see each other randomly on another day. I can't remember the word, guys. I don't know what I'm trying to say, but we would just randomly hang out rather than feeling like we have to pop something on our calendar a month in advance because of how busy everyone is. And of course, it's going to go that way because you enter your 30s and life gets in the way. We all have to work much harder to see each other. There's a lot of different barriers that are in place, from prioritizing your relationship to maybe, having more responsibilities at work, to family responsibilities, to living in different places. There's just a lot more to navigate. And there's a lot more barriers to your time together. So ensuring that you protect your time that you do have now, and acknowledging that your friendships are going to evolve, but working hard to have that new commitment of time together. And also acknowledging that your friendships aren't dependent on the amount of time you spend together, but rather the intention and quality of that time. Guys, I definitely had this moment in my little monologue there where I zoned out for a second because I'm still trying to think of that word. It's not sporadic. It's going to drive me fucking mental. Oh my God. Guys, I need to go to get it out of my head, because I'm not going to be able to finish this episode if I'm just consistently thinking of this. I felt myself just totally disassociate for a second. Classic. Anyways, your friendships will change. That's what we're getting at. And it's okay. That's also, I think, a chapter in your friendship is changing and welcoming something else, which is also a beautiful thing. It's just different. So I guess that also goes on to my next point, which is really about, you have the evolution of friends, but with this time also comes the evolution of family. And this has been one that is very thrown in my face recently. So, as your friends are entering all these new chapters, a lot of us have parents entering a new chapter through their aging. And I have really been hit with the reality of aging parents, more so my father. And I think those who listened to my podcast a few weeks ago would have heard me speak about my dad's health scares. And it really, really made me realize that my dad is moving into a new stage of life. And my relationship from parent looking after child to child looking after parent is starting to occur. And I think it's always so interesting that the people who bring us into this world and who raise us and look after us, when they start to age, that relationship pivots and the child becomes the parent to the parent. It's just such a fascinating concept that this is how life works. I think one of my favorite TikTok videos, I saw it on TikTok, Instagram, whatever, it was a few years ago. And it was this girl who was posting about dropping her mom to the airport. And the text on the video is essentially successfully dropped mom to the airport, checked her in, and I'm tracking her flight for arrival. And then there was another one that was traveling with parents, and the kids become in charge of the schedule. And it was it's always the daughters. It's holding the passports, checking everyone in. And it always makes me giggle because it's just such an evolution of a family dynamic. And even in my own, I remember a few years ago going to the US when I was living in Australia with my mom, my dad, my sister, and me. And, I must have been 30 or 31. My sister was in her 20s. And I had everyone's passports. I checked us all in. We were going through customs in Australia. You go through and you scan your passport to get into the international terminal. And I had them all in a line. And I was like, okay, mom, you go first. Put her passport. And then I was like, Lily, you're next. And then dad's behind me. I was like, you guys forgot your suitcase. I'm grabbing the suitcase and handing it through. The man who was standing behind our group was giggling so much because I looked like I was herding cats. It was so hysterical. But anyways, there is this transition that happens. And that's the funny elements of it. But it is really hard when you start to see your parents aging and they start to become weaker and they're not as, can't do as much as you always remembered them doing. And beyond all of the things that people are going through, we also then have this other transition that is super confronting. And I did a whole episode on pre-grieving. And I think that is something that is also melded into this moment of another change that is really big and trying to get a handle on what that looks like. And I think no wonder why everything feels a little overwhelming right now, because everything is so transient. But I really started to question this further and wondering, like, is one stage really better than the other? Because looking at all these different stages, from aging to becoming parents to moving cities to whatever it is, getting married, there are all these different stages in life, but do they really replace one another? And is one better than the other? And this goes to my next point, is when thinking through this, grief and transitions, there's this myth that one life stage replaces another. And I think we all spend time mourning the past and then being fearful of the future. And one of my least favorite sentiments in life is this idea of like certain eras being the best eras of your life. 20s being the best years of your life, 30s, 40s, whatever it is, 50s. Ultimately, I always feel like there's some, to be fair, actually, in the past, I feel like it was always like your youth was the best years of your life. It's like the 20s are the best years of your life. And I feel like as we have become less, scared of aging, I've noticed that sentiment shifts. And as I'm getting into when I'm in my 20s, I'm more focused on being in my 20s. Now I'm in my 30s and I'm really focused on that. And, I remember when I had my 30th birthday, in my speech, I was like, I feel like I'm entering my prime. I did a little speech on my 30th. No shit, no surprise. But it was really sweet because my mom's friends who were there came up to me, who were anywhere from 60s to 70s, 50s to 70s. And they were like, every era, it just keeps getting better. And I loved that sentiment, where it just, instead of one stage replacing another, you're building on each of these life stages. And I try and remind myself that every year is the best year. And these chapters are not replacing others, but they're layering on top of them. And maybe one thing that I thought was the best thing I did this year I'm not going to look back in 10 years and think that that was the best thing I do then. You're always picking and choosing and building different moments. So this has provided me a bit of solace, because I think as one chapter of my life is going through this huge change, I'm reminding myself that I'm not saying goodbye, but rather saying see you later to the previous things. So when I ask myself, like, will those night outs ever happen again? Like, the last few years of my life, I would say I've been filled with so much adventure, tons of travel, lots of really fun parties, beautiful dinners with my girlfriends, dancing until the sunrise, lots and lots of new countries, and a few too many DJs that it's hard to recall all my favorites. Girls trips, friends trips, work trips, great wine, feeling active, feeling healthy. It has been a really beautiful blessing, falling in love. And I think the underlying element has been just a lot of adventure. And I guess there's a part of me that was wondering if I'm saying goodbye to this. And that has been really hard. Also, I'm like self-imposed saying goodbye to this because I'm so exhausted from the travel. I've also been like, I need to stay home this year. But again, I keep reminding myself that one life stage doesn't replace another. It layers, it adds to it, but it doesn't take away the travel. It doesn't take away the adventure. It doesn't take away the party. All of that still exists. And maybe they're just becoming less constant and more intentional. And maybe different types of priorities are arising. And I feel like for me, that is what's happening right now, is other priorities are taking place, and they are for a lot of friends too. And that's a beautiful thing. And we'll join each other in these new chapters. And it's interesting because as I was diving further into this and thinking through it, I was reflecting on where I grew up. And I grew up in a really small town. So there's often this idea that's pushed on you in where I grew up, that's all about settling down. The place I grew up is a town called Townsville in far north Queensland in Australia. So 170,000 people, very small. It's a big military town. And we ended up there when my mother's family moved there. My grandfather, he was a Indonesian historian. So he was asked to go over to open the Indonesian history department. So that's how my mother ended up there. And then my family ended up there when we moved there years later when my mom and dad met. bit of a pivot there, but explaining Townsville. So small town. It's like, because there's like a lot of country towns around Townsville, like this is like the bigger town that like people come to who are like out on properties as well. Anyway, so this idea of settling down is really common. And I think a lot of people who grow up in small towns can relate to this. Essentially settling down is getting married, having kids. And people were doing this in like early 20s in Townsville. And I remember all I wanted to do was leave. And I'm really thankful for my parents for raising me in such like a open childhood where I feel like we had so much culture that they brought into our house from their own lives and just who my family is. But I just wanted to leave Townsville. I wanted more, and I wanted to escape this idea of settling down. It always really irked me. So I moved to NYC. Well, I moved to go away for college first. And then as soon as I graduated university, about a year later, I moved to New York, or maybe 8 months. And I really moved to escape it. And I remember meeting so many other people in New York who I also feel like were escaping the same thing. I think New York is a place that draws you to escape other ways of the way the world thinks. And you come here to have something different. And now I'm finding all the people that we escaped these sentiments, now we're all bloody settling down, getting married and having kids. And I'm like, wait, what? I thought we made an agreement not to do this, which is so silly because like I want to get married and I want to have kids. Like that's not what I'm saying. I just thought it was funny. But it's just this idea of, again, like, wait, what? I thought we were going to be, young and living in New York forever. And of course, this is just what I'm constantly going through is there's a part of me that wants that and there's another part of me that doesn't. And all the people close to me know that I want to, eventually move from New York. It's not that far away. I want something quieter. I want more nature, all those things. But it's like I want it on my terms. And I would love it if all my friends and I could do it all at the same time, which is so selfish. But again, I think what I was like starting to think through was, again, this idea of like one chapter of your life replacing another, and that it's going to look different for everyone, and everyone's going to feel these pulls at different times. And what I've liked about New York is I've found that we've all made these decisions on our own terms, and it looks differently for everyone. Like not everyone wants to leave New York, and that's totally okay. I'm going to have friends that will stay here and raise their kids, and it's going to be beautiful. And then other ones that have left to smaller places, and it's all beautiful based on what works for you and accepting of what path you want to take. But I think what I really was reflecting on was having this idea drilled into me from a young age of this, like, not from my parents, but from what I was exposed to of settling down. And I like that I felt like being here, I get to choose what that looks like. And also, I just like hate the sentiment of settling down because I think getting married and having kids doesn't have to look like how it looks like for everyone. And that's also something that a lot of my friends and I have been speaking about, is that you build what this life stage is for you. And I have a lot of people in my life that want to raise their kids, not in a traditional sense, and travel more with them and maybe live in different places and have them going to different international schools or whatnot. And I love the concept of really having a lot of creativity and flexibility in how you want to define these chapters in your life too. So none of these chapters are replacing one another. They're just building on each other. And, with that comes also identity shifts, which I spoke about earlier, is that as these chapters are changing, so is your identity. And it's the next bucket I wanted to dive into is identity shifts. So I think with all of this around like grief and change, the biggest question I've been asking myself is, who am I now? So as I'm finding out all these things are changing with my friends and their lives are changing, I'm trying to figure out, what do I want and who am I? And I've been feeling very existential during this time, often I'm finding myself reflecting a lot on, the meaning of life. Why are we really here? What's important to me? Who is important to me? Where do I want to spend my time? And I don't have the answers because I just don't. I'm trying to figure it out, guys. And I think as our friends and family move into these different chapters, their identities are shifting. So with this shift comes this additional layer of mourning, and we're mourning one version of ourselves as you enter another. And I think my identity, as you can probably tell from this podcast episode, is I'm pulled in very different directions. And I think that's why I'm struggling to be like, what is it that I want to focus on? What is the meaning to me? What are the things that I want to be my next chapter? Because part of me wants to live in New York, build my podcast, travel always, go on adventures, be in my party girl era. And then the other side of me wants to move somewhere quiet, have a deep desire to nature, be at home and don't talk to anyone. So it's very confusing. And neither of those I could do full time. So I think what I'm coming to is that I think what makes a person interesting is these contradictions. So having these two very diverse contradictions, I'm starting to tell myself that is who I am and that I do want both those things and I can have all those things. Maybe the question isn't what is my identity, but just listening to my intuition and just feeling what I feel in that moment, because your identity is always shifting. And I think with all the noise around all this change, it's hard to kind of pick to what that is. And I'm trying to give myself more time to turn inward and really connect to what feels right for me in this moment, and just allowing the identity to come to me rather than feeling like I need to define it. So yeah, guys, sorry, just processing that. It's just a lot. It is a lot. And I think even now, as I'm kind of going through my notes and doing this podcast episode, this is cathartic because I'm still trying to figure it out, and it's been so real. And this idea of not defining this chapter and my identity and who I am right now is like giving me a lot of freedom, but it's almost like it's like hitting me in this moment of like, oh, damn, I need to do this. Like there is freedom in this and I don't need to feel pressured into things. Which brings me to my next segment, which is looking at everything as a season and the freedom that you can find in your life as a season. So I started to think about this more as if we looked at our lives as seasons rather than chapters that are closing or, moving, but rather things that you can ebb and flow between. I like the idea of like building on. It's like you're a book and you're adding to it more, but I don't like the idea of something feeling closed. So looking at it as seasons, you can pick and choose between all of them. And depending on what is active in your life at that time, you're ebbing and flowing between these different seasons. So maybe it could look like this. You have spring. You're uncovering something new. You're welcoming a different type of energy. You're clearing out the old. Early mornings, it's fresh, it's new. Summer, spontaneity, sunrise and sunsets, closeness, adventures, there's freedom, there's energy, you're excited. It's your party girl era. We'll call that summer. Fall, you're saying goodbye. You're preparing for rest. Crisp, fresh air, there's reflection. It's a moment to prepare before you're slow down, but you're still active, you're still around, you're just preparing. Winter, intimacy, slow living, quiet reflections, rest. It is quiet, it is restful, you are recuperating, you're building for something new. So you go through each season like you do in a year. Sometimes maybe you're in one season longer than others, but you can always go back. You never have to stay in one season forever. And maybe that is the beauty of it. You can grieve on one season, but remind yourself it's always there if you want to revisit it. Just like how when you're in winter, you're always wishing you were in summer and you know you're going to get there eventually. And then you do. And then you're in summer and you're craving winter, but enjoying the season you're in and not feeling like it's the be all and end all. And also, there's no pressure to rush into one season over another. And that's something that has been very active for me is as friends start to enter new chapters or new seasons, I started to ask myself, should I be there? And I'm entering my own seasons, but I don't want to feel rushed because everyone else is. And I think it kind of ties back to that small town settling down mentality. I think so often when you stay in the same environment where you were born and raised, you do get affected by what everyone else around you is doing. But if you remove yourself from that and see what else is out there and what other people are doing, you can really start to tap into what actually you want to do. And clearly, I'm being affected by that in my own way of like everyone moving into these new seasons in life and trying to figure out what's right for me. And I may be in summer while other friends are in winter or whatnot, and that's okay. And I don't need to feel like I need to rush into another one, but really choosing what's right for me and feeling into that energy in this moment, because they're always all going to be there and you're going to experience them all dependent on however you define them. And I just like the idea of life being something that ebbs and flows, and it doesn't always have to be one thing, and it can be this beautiful mix of just many different experiences, and none are better than the other. So I guess like as I wrap up today, because that was a lot, a thought had come to mind. And I think maybe the reason I'm grieving so much about all these changes is because I have so much gratitude. There's so much grief in the gratitude. Oh my God, I'm gonna cry. I think I just am sad because I have so much gratitude for the last few years and for the friendships I've made, the experiences we've had together. And the gratitude is just so overwhelming that it comes out as grief. And I don't want to let that go. I have made some of the most wonderful friends over the last few years and built really beautiful connections and had some of the best memories I could ever have asked for. And I just feel like it's ending, and it's so scary. And I'm telling myself all these things and diving into it to remind myself that this isn't the end and that there's more beautiful memories to come. They're just going to look a little different. And maybe that's also fear of what this is going to look like too. And again, I think this pressure of trying to figure out what I want to do next. And I just keep telling myself I just have to feel into what feels right and that it's all going to work out in the end. And I really do think that I talk a lot about like we're missing out on the party. We're saying goodbye to the party. But I mean, I think it's not about that. I think it's about the people that I was with in those moments, and that those people are still here, even if the way that we're spending time together changes a little bit. And, I think I just keep saying to myself, especially after everything we spoke about today, quoted from one of the great shows of our generation, The OC. And I may get this slightly wrong, but the premise was essentially like, it's not goodbye, it's see you later. And that is what I keep telling myself about these chapters. It's just see you later. We're going to figure it out. We're going to have so many more memories. And life is really a magical thing. And as I get older and as I'm going through these big changes, I think I had said to you guys, I'm getting very existential and I'm wondering like, what is the meaning of life? And I think it is about the people that you spend your life with and just ensuring that the people around you are ones that bring you joy and happiness. And that to me has to be it. And then there's probably more, but I think maybe it's just the pursuit of joy and whatever it is that fills up your cup. And I do feel like not doing it alone and doing it with people around you is the best way to experience everything that this world has to offer. So I hope by sharing some of this sadness that I'm feeling in the celebrations of life, that it makes other people feel seen, because I know I was really scared to share this feeling with some of my friends. But when we did at that dinner and I realized a lot of people are going through this, it made me realize that we're really all in this together and I'm not alone in this sentiment. So thank you for listening. Appreciate you all. I asked you this every week, but while you're here, while we're waiting, oh my God, guys, I feel like you might have a little bit of time right now to go and like my podcast, rate it, make a comment on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. It really helps with surfacing this podcast to other people that might be interested in it. So take 10 seconds, 30 seconds doing it right now while I'm talking. I'm watching you, but not, and I'm still going to talk to give yourself time to go do it. Share it with your friends, and thank you for always listening to Note to Self. See you next week.